Turn your attention here to the material panel. What you need to start with first is look at the material browser. When you look there, what you'll see is the default set of materials in your current document. Below that, you should see the material library for Autodesk. It's here that you'll navigate through to find materials that you would like to work with. Let's say for now, we'll look for aluminum brushed metal. So for example, if I adjust the sizing here, it'll make it easier to navigate. And what we could do is we could scroll through and let's see if we could find a metal brushed aluminum. You can see here, here's machined aluminum. And as we go through here, okay, so once we decide on our material, what you'll want to do is bring it into your current document. And you could do that simply by selecting it and using this little option here to bring it into your document. You could also right-click and then add it to your document materials. Once you have your material here, okay, you can use the editor using this button here. And one, I would consider taking a look at the preview icon, right? Because different shapes are going to reflect light differently. So try to pick a shape that best matches the shapes of the objects that you have that you're going to render. So to start off with first, take a look at the entire material editor palette here. We're going to pay attention to generic, reflectivity, bump, and tint. Under generic, what you're doing here is you can select color. Okay, if I click right on the swatch, I can adjust the color here, and you can see once I've adjusted the color, the update is automatic. Now this color is combined with the image, so mainly what we're looking at right here is the color of the image. If I click on the swatch for the image, I get the image editor. With this palette, what you can do is you can adjust the brightness of the image, as you see here. I can also transform the image, which represents the sizing of the image and how it's mapped on the object here, as well as the scale. So you can offset the texture. You can basically scale the texture as well. You'll notice if I go higher here, and let's go twice as high, or a lot higher. You can see how the preview changes here. Let's put it back to around 12. Okay, and you can see here that you've got the locked aspect ratio. If you change one dimension, it'll change the other, respectively. And if I wanted to change the material here, all I would need to do is click on the material name. When I go there, then I could go back to the larger library of materials in the Autodesk library, and then be able to, for example, let's say I wanted a much finer brushed metal. I would scroll down. I think this is where I was looking for this. Okay, let's scroll down. Let's look for metal here, and you'll see you'll start to run into the ornamental metals. And I believe we were looking at metal. For example, here's brushed random, right? Now watch this. If I change the material here, notice it changes there too, right? So you can start off with whatever default material you want to start to use, and then simply by changing the image texture, you could customize it. All right. Now also, again, you can see here as I change the color of it, it's just going to multiply. Now if this doesn't suit your needs, you can also use tint, right? When you use tint and you turn on tint, it actually colors the object. So here, if I wanted to use the same RGB value, what I could do is come over to RGB and set the red, green, blue values. Oops. Okay, and then you can see how now that's my blue brushed aluminum. And if I wanted to adjust it, I can do this in a variety of ways. For example, if I go back to HSL, I can use the same RGB value there, but lighten it. And you can see how it affects the actual preview there. All right, so you can spend hours working on this, playing with this, looking at reflectivity here. As you use the sliders, you can intensify or decrease the reflectivity. And here, if I let's put it around the midpoint right here. This is how the light is reflected off the object. Okay, direct is going to be perpendicular to the surface, and oblique is going to be non-perpendicular to the surface. If we look at bump map too, bump map is going to give us the surface texturing, right? Notice here, I've got this image as the texture map, but if I wanted to have the actual surface finish, what I could do is I could use the same image here, right, as my bump map. So if I check this, I can go back and try to find that same material, and now instead of just using it as a texture map, it's going to be used as a finish map. Now let's see, that's galvanized. We're looking for the same material, right? Here it is. Aluminum brushed metal. Right? So this applied to our texture map, we can increase the amount, and you can see there how it starts to roughen the surface. It starts to roughen the surface. So once we've decided what our settings are going to be for the bump, the temp, the reflectivity, and the generic properties, okay, now we can think about applying the material to our objects. So we can close out of these windows, okay, and here's our model. And once again, you'll notice that everything's on a layer. And if I use the material options here and use attach by layer, you'll see another dialog box here. You can see here's our edited material. And what we'll do here is we'll locate all our part layers. For example, here's the spacer. We'll just drag and drop the material onto those layers. And anything on those layers will be using this material that we're dropping right onto it. Okay? Now, what is it going to look like, right? Right now we're looking at conceptual in our viewport. Notice if I switch to realistic, okay, that's a realistic representation of the materials as they are right now, right? And this is a preview only. So whatever visual style I have here right now, for example, it's just a visual style for the window, right? When I want to preview the rendering, what I'm going to do is come over here to the render window and use my render button to render a draft quality rendering. So if I click here and I go and open that render window, then I can see right now what is the quality of my rendering. You'll notice that bump mapping, it's pretty severe, right? Really, really harsh. Right now, with just a single light, maybe not a lot of illumination, right? So this is where we have this back and forth process of revising, re-rendering, revising, re-rendering. It could be that I need to make changes to my material. It could be that I need to make additions to lighting, for example. In this case, I would say we have to do both. So take a look. Here's how you can proceed. Again, if I just switch back to conceptual, or if I want to see it as a live preview, I can use realistic. All right, I feel like if I take a look at my materials browser and I edit my brushed silver right here, what I notice about this is that the bump map is too heavy. You can see that. I did it on purpose, 377. Let's put it just a little bit over 100, right? Significantly reduced. And then, in addition, Again, here's the view. And if I render one more time, now I can see what the results are, right? A little less severe with this surface texture there. Now I can continue editing the material, but I can also think about how I map the material on the objects. You can see the orientation of the material here on the edges as well as in the faces. I can change that. We'll talk about that later. But you can see that right now maybe I'm losing some definition of the edges, and that might be because of the lighting. So let's talk about adding some more lights.